and then of course consulting. Let's get rolling now. Our course here is going to be broken down into 3 major modules. Our very first module, we're going to go through what is an operating system. What can we do with some of these operating systems? We'll talk about the technology. This is going to be further broken down into 2 sub-modules. We're going to spend some time first discussing Linux. In fact, you're going to set up a Linux virtual machine to use with our lab exercises. Additionally, we're going to set up a Windows system. We're going to set up a Windows VM. We're going to use those for the lab exercises as well. In Module 2, we're going to spend time with networking. So we're going to learn the different OSI layers, learn about networking, how network communication works. Module 3, we're going to spend time on system administration and 3 different scripting languages. So we'll talk through Bash. We're going to spend time on PowerShell as well as Python. In our first module, system administration, again, our first sub-module is Linux. What we're going to do first is set up VMware. We're going to need VMware installed on our system, both to configure our Linux virtual machine for this course, as well as the Windows virtual machine we're going to use a little bit later in this module. So let's begin with VMware installation. Now, why do we need virtualization? Well, what it allows us to do is run a number of different operating systems on top of our host operating system. Your host operating system is probably Windows of some kind or Mac of some kind. A few of you may even be using Linux. What this allows us to do then is build the operating systems on top of that in these virtualized containers, if you will, so that we can all have the same underlying technology, the same Windows VM, the same Linux VM, so that we can use that with our lab exercises, and it's not going to have impact on our underlying host operating system. We're going to use VMware, either Fusion if you're on a Mac, or Player if you're on Windows, throughout this course. Now, there are a number of other virtualization technologies, but the ones that we're going to officially support is going to be the VMware series. Now, why do we need a lab? The obvious answer here is, well, we need specific dedicated systems for this type of testing. We're going to make changes to these underlying operating systems, and what we don't want to do is, of course, break your host operating system. We don't want you to have to take your laptop or your desktop or whatever you may have and then completely blow it away and install an entirely new operating system. So we're going to use virtualization so that we can have multiple of these virtual hosts to use throughout this course. Now, we refer to the host as the operating system running on your laptop or desktop. The virtual machines, or VMs, or also referred to as guests, are going to run inside of our virtualization technology. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to set up VMware. Now, as we mentioned before, there are other virtualization technologies. There are so many that if we went through all of them, half this course would be, let's go through installing VMware. Let's go through setting up QEMU, VirtualBox, Parallels. We had to pick one. Now, if you choose to use another, that's fantastic. Feel free to do so. However, what we're not going to do is publish content related to the installation. Additionally, we're going to push content and deliver our content for installation on Windows or a Mac. We're not going to walk through installation if your host OS is Linux or a BSD. And the reason is every flavor or distribution, the installation is going to be a little bit different. And now, especially when we get into that cross-reference, that matrix of maybe VirtualBox on a different distribution, we just simply don't have time to go through that. So the officially supported operating systems for our host are going to be Windows and a Mac, and we're going to support the VMware products. Again, if you want to try one of the others, or if you've got a different host operating system, that's absolutely fine. You're just going to have to work through the installation yourself. So as we mentioned, there's going to be sort of a fork here. We're going to first install on Windows. If you were using a Mac, you're going to need to skip ahead for the installation. The installation is going to come a little bit later in this session. So again, installation here on Windows, our VMware installation. If you are a Mac user, please skip ahead. So installing VMware Player on Windows, what we first need to do is download the software. So if you go to the URL on the screen here, you can then you can then download VMware Player for Windows. So we're going to download this. You're going to run through the executable. The default options here are going to be absolutely fine. At the time of this writing, we've got the version on the screen. The version here will probably change throughout the lifetime of this course. Feel free to get the latest and greatest. Now, as the version numbers change, the user interface might change just a little bit. The installation should be the same. Essentially, just click next, 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 next to get the installation set up. Next, we're going to the Start VMware Player. At this point, you may be prompted to say, hey, do you want to upgrade to Workstation? You do not need to do this. VMware Workstation is a paid product. It is not free, whereas Player we can use for free. Now, if you want to upgrade and pay for Workstation, feel free to do so, but you do not need to do that to complete the course. So now at this point, we are done with the installation of VMware on Windows. So you can skip ahead to the next session. Mac users, we are going to run through the installation of Fusion on the Mac. So to download Fusion, Fusion is the name of the product by VMware we use to do virtualization on a Mac. So if we go to the URL on the screen, you're going to download and say download free trial. Unfortunately, Fusion is not a totally free product. Now, we can use it for free for 30 days, which if you go through this course fast enough is absolutely doable. Unfortunately, after that point, you're either going to have to uninstall it or pay for the license. And the license, I think, is around $100 or so. I don't know. And of course, the pricing may change. Unfortunately, that's the way that it is with VMware Fusion. We're then going to launch Fusion. You're going to probably get a prompt that says, hey, I downloaded this from the internet. Do you actually want to execute this? Click open. It's going to ask for some additional credentials here because we need additional permissions to install Fusion. And then it's going to ask, do we want to improve VMware Fusion? You can click yes or no. If you click yes, it will send information on your usage to VMware that they will use according to what the text says to improve Fusion. Make whatever choice that you want to there. At this point, you're going to run through the installation process. It'll probably ask you to reboot, and then you are good. VMware Fusion is installed. So whether you used Windows or a Mac, at this point, you should have your VMware product of choice, your Fusion or your Player, installed. At this point, we have completed installation of VMware. So we are good to go. We have completed our very first session. In our next session, we're going to walk through building our Linux VM.